When we last saw Aeneas, well, wait, we haven't seen Aeneas yet. When we last left off, Juno had visited Aeolus in his kingdom of the winds, and had asked him to stir up a storm against Aeneas and his Trojans, as they sailed to Italy. Aeolus agreed, and in these lines we are going to see, and hear even, the effects of that persuasion. Haec ubi dicta refers directly to Aeolus's reply to Juno in lines 76 to 80. You can assume a sunt here to make this clause complete, when these things were said. In the next line, Aeolus releases the wind with the alliterative cavum conversa cuspide. And when you add the accusative montem, you also get chiastic word order. Supposedly, the gate into the mountain was on the side, hence how Aeolus releases the winds by banging the mountain on its side. The ablative absolute in line 82, agmine facto, is military language. The winds are rushing out like they are arranging for a battle. Qua in 83 means where. It's an adverb that comes from the ablative feminine form of quiquae quod, and just like before, assume an est in this clause to complete it, where the gate has been given. Incubuere uses the alternative ere ending for the third person plural in the perfect tense, with the ablative of location mari. This word is a third declension neuter I stem, and so that's why this long I ending shows the ablative. And on the next two lines, we have three names of winds. The Eurus is the east wind, the Notus is the south wind, and the Africus is the southwest wind. These directions refer to where the winds originate, by the way. So the Eurus blows from the east to the west, and the Africus originates in the province of Africa, which includes the city of Carthage and areas west of it. We're not talking about Egyptian Africa. The Africus is one of the storm-bringing winds, and that's why Virgil here describes it as creber procelis, frequent with gusts. These winds are also the subject of wovunt in line 86, and wastos modifies the fourth declension accusative plural fluctus. Let's look again at the use of the verb ruunt here. It's used twice in 3 lines, but the first time there's no object, while the second time there is, totum, as in totum mare, the whole sea. So the meaning of ruunt changes when there's no object. Like in line 83, it means rush down or fall with violence. And sometimes Virgil and other poets use this verb to describe a torrent of rainfall, so it's entirely appropriate here when describing the storm. But in line 85, with the object, ruunt has to mean something more like overturn or upheave. Line 87 has great parallel structure. The verb begins, but the subjects follow. Clamor and stridor are the nominatives, and virum, short for virorum, and rudentum are the genitive plurals. The same construction with the verb at the beginning, followed by the nominative, shows up in the next line, and then in line 90 as well. Ponto is an ablative of location, and the incubat in line 89 recalls the incubuere, just a few lines earlier. And much like incubuere, intonuere is another third-person plural perfect verb. This is thunder, and the rest of the line is our lightning. Also note that many of these lines begin with a verb with an intensifying prefix before its subject. There's a whole lot of energy in this storm, and the word order and verb choice illustrates that. All things really do forebode a coming death for these men. At last, we get our first mention of Aeneas, our hero, in line 92. It's a little unusual for the first mention of his name to be delayed this late. Before now, he's been referred to as just that man, virum, in lines 1 and 10, and ille, in line 3, or as the king of the Trojans, regem teucrorum. Aenei is a dative of reference here. It looks like it could be genitive, but this line heavily refers to another, and I'll get to that at the end of this video. And so that makes it clear that this word is dative. The limbs, membra, for Aeneas. The frigora here is like the chill of fear or of death. Also keep in mind the actions in line 93, the groaning and stretching out of both his hands. He's praying to the gods here. Aeneas' speech in lines 94 to 101 goes directly back to Homer, both as an echo of Odysseus' speech in his storm, and in reference to the events of the Trojan War. Quis is a shortened form of quibus, the dative plural, and translate the main verb contigit impersonally. It happened or it befell. Technically, its subject is the infinitive opetere, to encounter death, to die, or just dying. In line 95 has two prepositional phrases, antora patrum and Troiae sub moenibus altis. This last phrase here recalls the Altae Moenia Romae in line 7, but here the walls of Troy are high, not the city itself. Line 96 has a superlative vocative, fortissime, qualified by two genitives in succession, gentis, of the race, and Danaum, of the Danaans, a Homeric term for the Greeks, the descendants of Danaus, who founded Argos, Juno's cherished city, and he had 50 daughters, by the way. Tudidae, in line 97, a Greek vocative, is the son of Tydeus, or Diomedes. This is a patronymic. In the Iliad, Book 5, Diomedes has his Aristeia, his greatest moment in battle, and Diomedes actually faces Aeneas, and he almost killed him too, if not for the intervention of Aphrodite, so for the Romans Venus, who rescued him. So here, Aeneas directly references that event and wishes that he had died a hero's death. The mene in line 97 is similar to the mene in Juno's speech in line 37. It's the subject of the infinitive poltuose, the perfect active form. Oh, that I was not able. The complementary infinitives ocumbere and effundere complete Aeneas' thoughts. Ocumbere is like the opetere a few lines above, to fall in death or just to die. Iliakis is another word for Trojan, like the word Iliad. In line 98, we have a chiasmus. To a dextra is an ablative of means, and he's talking to Diomedes right here. And honc animam is the object of effundere. And finally, Aeneas concludes his speech with a reference to the misfortunes of war. Three phrases that begin with ubi, and this is an anaphora, a repetition of a word at the beginning of phrases. Saevus modifies Hector, but savage is probably not the best translation here. Maybe fierce is better. With telo jacet, lies killed by the spear, or beneath the spear. With Aeacidae, a genitive patronymic referring to Achilles, the grandson of Aeacus. Huge Sarpedon, in lines 99 to 100, is the son of Zeus, Jupiter, a Trojan ally who was killed fighting Patroclus in Book 16 of the Iliad. And the Simois is one of the two rivers of Troy, the Xanthus or Scamander being the other. Tot, so many, could either refer to the virum, the genitive plural of so many men, or to the accusative scuta, galeas, and corpora, so many shields, helmets, and bodies. The action behind the perfect participle correpta refers to all of the objects, but it really reflects another action of the Simois. This river snatches up and rolls under its waves the shields, etc. And notice the scansion of the end of line 101. Scuta virum galeas quet fortia corpora vovit. Normally, in hexameter lines, only the 5th and 6th foot can be full words, but here the 4th foot is also a complete word, and this creates a nice final sound to Aeneas' speech. Fortia corpora vovit. Okay, so in these lines we have our first introduction to Aeneas, and there's heavy reference to the Odyssey. It's not an exact copy, and it's important when we read the Aeneid and see these references to Homer or other works to see what's different. Virgil's changes are often highly important and deliberate, and worth noticing too. Aeneas' first words are similar to Odysseus's in Book 5 of the Odyssey. He says, 3-4 times blessed, my friends in arms who died on the plains of Troy those years ago. Virgil here adds an antora patrum, before the eyes of their fathers, the first reference to sons who die young, before their fathers do. Polites in Book 2, Pallas and Lausus in Book 10, Turnus in Book 12. Aeneas and Ascanius are the notable exceptions, by the way. Also, Odysseus mentions that it would have been better for him to have died at Troy, because he could then merit a proper burial. But Aeneas' outcry here doesn't mention a burial. Instead, he's sentimental and nostalgic, recalling the misfortunes of the great Trojans who died. Also in these lines is the description of the storm, and there's a lot of alliteration to reinforce the imagery. We have the seas in line 81, the V's in line 82, terras turbine in line 83, vastos vovunt in 86. Virgil also uses polysyndeton to show the rapidity of the action in lines 85, 87, and 88. Metrically, there are a lot of dactyls in these lines, which is relatively uncharacteristic of Virgil, who prefers spondees. In lines 85 and 86, we can hear the winds blow through with these dactyls. Uno rusque notusque ruunt creberque procelis Africus. Before we shift our perspective to the huge rolling waves of the ocean and deep, dark spondies. Et vastos vovunt ad litora fluctus. Finally, this is our first impression of Aeneas, and first impressions are everything, right? He's weak here, wishing for death, uncertain of what he should do, and very unheroic. It's Virgil's intention to show that Aeneas is a different type of hero from these Homeric models. He shoulders the burdens of his people and performs his duty, whether he likes it or not. We are supposed to see Aeneas's weaknesses here, and we should be okay with them. Virgil isn't Homer, he's more modern, and Aeneas isn't Odysseus. He's a more modern version, updated for Augustus's time. And I'll leave you with this thought. I mentioned how a lot of these lines are similar and based on lines from the Odyssey, so here I'll highlight for you all of the lines that have Odyssey antecedents. But there's one line that connects within the Aeneid. Our first appearance of Aeneas, line 92, is almost identical to the second to last line in the whole work, Book 12, line 951. Illis ovuntur frigora membra. And illi is dative, and that's how we know that Aenei is dative. And in fact, there are other connections to the end of the whole work, the stretching out of hands, line 930 and 931, and the groaning in line 952. This beginning-ending connection isn't uncommon in ancient epic, but it also brings up the question of why our first mention of Aeneas connects with the end of the work and with the death that brings the Aeneid to a close. And there's some parallelism going on here, but the question of why is still open for interpretation. Next up, we see how the storm overwhelms the Trojan fleet.